First Nations Development Institute is a 40-year-old economic development organization whose primary focus is trying to revitalize the economies of American Indian reservation communities. Indian tribes and Indian communities throughout the United States hold some of the most pristine lands in the U.S. When you look at conservation and the way it's practiced in the U.S. and around the world today, it's interesting because the technology and the tools they're using have gone really relatively unchanged for the last half a century. And I would argue, we're in a worse place today from an imminent climate disaster than we were 50 years ago. In this instance, I think innovative solutions for climate change and the answers to mitigating that change might be thousands of years old. And I would argue that what we haven't tapped is the non-Western approaches, the non-capitalistic approaches to conservation. When you look at the practices of indigenous communities throughout the world, they've been doing amazing work in preserving biodiversity and waters and lands and air in their territories very effectively. I think there's a lot to be learned from the practices that indigenous peoples are doing throughout the world and the United States. If we were to adopt some of these practices, we could actually have benefits that extend beyond the territories that the indigenous peoples occupy.
We should be focused more on all the species that were once here, no matter how trivial it might be. And so a number of people are working on recovering the black-footed ferret. We're all hopeful that someday the ferret will be recovered and will be removed from the threatened, endangered species list. We're doing it for our reasons, but we're also doing it for everybody. Our work here has societal benefits that extend far beyond, our reservation. And so that's something that I'm really proud of.
When you look at the ecological stewardship and the mindset of Indian people, it's really people-centered, it's really cultural-centered, it's really land-centered, not necessarily money-centered as a way of looking at the world. And that's where I think our ecological stewardship model differs from that of Western society.
I strongly believe as Indigenous people, we're entrusted, we're the caretakers of Mother Earth. We have the knowledge of, the plant that is passed on, through generations. Food sovereignty is important to us because it's part of our culture, it's part of who we are.
First Nations did a report about 5 years ago looking at philanthropic funding for Indian-controlled projects and found that only 23/100% of philanthropic dollars go to Indian communities. So in our mind, that has to change. People ask me all the time, what can I do if folks want to, reach into their pockets and help us out from a financial point of view? First Nations has created the Tribal Lands Conservation Fund, just for that reason, so that we can make more resources available to Native communities and tribes to do the ecological stewardship and conservation work they've been doing for thousands of years. We believe, and it's been proved again and again, that when Indians control their own resources, they are better managers and better stewards of those resources, and when folks are doing it for them. But more importantly, that these people and their resiliency might be one of the few places we can find hope for answers to a world we've messed up pretty badly. That their practices and their way of knowing and their way of being could really help us understand ways in which we can survive.